Hi everyone and welcome to Why Are You the Review. We have now officially watched all of the episodes and we are halfway through the behind the scenes. So by the time this is uploaded, I imagine episode 3 and 4 may have been filmed. Just to point something out, this is not fact-based, it is just my own opinions. That's all it is. You may agree with some of the things I say, you may not agree, but it is just based on my opinion, and that includes my reaction to the story because of the COVID-19. Yes, that did hinder it in some ways, but I can only review what I've seen. So before we get into the overall episodes, I think I'll talk about the last episode in a small degree and then incorporate it into the rest. For me, the last episode wasn't the strongest to end on. I felt there was a lot of mismatch to the episode. I didn't like that Fighter's father was just on the phone and it was resolved that quickly, considering how it ended not that too many episodes before. It just felt very unrealistic. It felt very rushed, and that could be because of COVID-19. Also, it was just, I guess it was just a bit of a thank you to the fans, the last episode, because it was just more or less the four main couples at the beach, no one else, just them, and they can film quite easily if it was just those four, because they can't film too many people. It was lovely because we did see them kind of make fun of the cheesiness of their relationships and how they come across. Also, the possessive nature of Tutor when it comes to Fighter, and just so that it ends on a really good note. You want the show to end happy, and it did. All four couples were very happy. They also consummated, it seems, their relationship in the end. I just felt the previous episode was much stronger. Overall, there at least was, it could have, the way it ended, that would have been fine for me. This episode, the last episode, was just more, I guess it was just they needed to fill up an episode. Now, overall, about the show, I was not too interested in the first couple of episodes. I felt they were good, but they could have been stronger. They didn't draw me in, but as the show went along, I felt it got better and better. The acting was actually pretty good from the beginning. It was just the story didn't really envelop me. As it went along, as I said, it got better and better to the point where I was really invested in finding out what was going to happen with these characters because of how different the two main couples are. And that was something the show did really well. Along with cinematography, that was beautiful the way it was shot. I think that's also what kept me staying, was not just the characters, but just how beautifully it was shot. Uh, I think each episode, apart from the end and the beginning episodes, got better and better because you got an understanding of the characters a lot more. I think when it first started, we obviously you don't know how an episode's going to go, and it felt almost fantasy in feeling because it was about the novel, and that's something that I will talk about, I think, later on. And so we were a bit confused. Well, I was a bit confused with what was real and what was not. And then they started to seep away from the idea of fiction and reality and base it in reality and have the main character's feelings real. We got to see a slow but brilliantly written relationship with Son and Saifar compared to how harsh and heavy and how quick Tutor and Fighter's relationship was, but it also kind of highlights what the characters were like from the beginning. I don't think there was any real hate between Tutor and Fighter, at least not on Fighter's part, but he didn't know how to express himself, and that was something I really liked. We got to see two characters struggling to really be themselves and wanting to be themselves, but also having to create an outer shell, a hard outer shell, so that no one could hurt them because they've already been hurt. And watching that break down and seeing how good of a job the actors did in building a relationship compared to Son and Saifar, which started with more or less a cheating element that built into an actual friendship that led into a relationship, and it was always innocent. There was nothing behind it that was ill intent. I think it started off very good, the episodes incorporating all of their friends, because there was too many characters for my personal opinion, but it was good at incorporating them, and it was very based on comedy. If you notice that the show was heavily influenced by trying to make you laugh because it was so mature in theme. I mean, this was at points I felt very uncomfortable watching this. I do think there were points that they overdid it. We knew they were couples, but it almost felt like we were watching a porno at points. I feel like they could have toned that down. But I am happy that we got a mature theme. Even though the characters are young, we got to see more adult ideas of relationships and just seeing them work, cook, clean, struggle, argue, get back together. They're realistic things. I feel they could have used some characters a lot more. Soul was completely dropped at one point, and it felt as if it just didn't make sense. I guess that's where I'm heading with that. She could have been incorporated so much more, and it just felt a bit strange because when she was dropped, she was the basis of Son's reasoning for kind of liking Saifar. And then for her not to be in it and it's just gone didn't really make sense. I know that she lied to Son and told him in the novel it was a different ending to get him to stop thinking about it and be himself, but there could have been a lot more of her incorporated. It would have worked as well having her talk to him and him talk to her about the novel and her telling him it's not real, the novel, his life is real. The episodes, I felt, at some points were a bit too long. They could have been a bit more condensed down. And I know that they fit them into an hour slot or some sorts. Sometimes they're longer than that. But I feel like shows like this benefit more from a 42 to 45 minute in length. Again, it got better. It highlighted characters. I felt more invested as the episodes went along. It felt as if the characters were also maturing with the episodes and they were understanding themselves a lot more, which I'm not just talking about their sexuality or liking someone. It felt as if the characters were genuinely developing at a real pace that works for an audience perspective, because we're not just watching their relationship build, we're watching them grow as people and mature. Now, I'm going to go into the characters. Even though I didn't speak for too long, I just feel overall the episodes, I feel like the characters have a bit more to them. So, just so you know, I've wrote the characters down and put them together, and then I've got questions. I'm going to start with Son and Sol's parents. Now, they were in it very minimal, so there wasn't really much to pick apart, but it was interesting to see that the dad was, it seemed, the more stern of the parents. He didn't believe in Son, which is frustrating when you believe in Sol, but you don't believe in Son. And I don't know if that's to do with men have to be like this, and women have to be like that, and that's their roles. But what I really liked was when they were talking to Son, you could see that the camera would pan on the mother, and she was more willing to allow Son to have his freedom, especially creatively. Because I feel like people think if you want to be creative, it's not really a viable option. You must be a doctor, you must be a lawyer. You get people telling you this a lot in life, but there's nothing wrong with being creative. If it wasn't for creative people, you wouldn't have radio shows, you wouldn't have TV shows, movies, music, theatres. People forget how much you rely on the arts. So and that goes into the mother. Again, she was in it more, so we got to see a bit more of her personality. You know, she was young at heart. It looked like she favoured Sol, but then as it went on, you could see she truly loved both her children and she wanted the best for them. She just knew that Son needed a bit of a wake up call because his grades weren't great. If you could pick up your grades, maybe she could convince the father that you could continue to write. I do wish we had seen them more because I feel having Son's home life dynamics would have really upped the depth of the character as well and shown that he comes from a loving family, but they just want the best for him. And there wasn't really much else to say about them. The next one is Tem, who, there's not me being shady about the actor. Who is Tem? I do not remember, but when I looked up on my drama, the character was in a supporting role. I need help. Who is this person? I don't remember. Okay, so we're gonna go to Luktan and Soda. I really like those two. And actually, as much as I wanted them in the show more, now that I think back, I think they had the right amount of screen time. They were obviously hosting the web show about uh, the most attractive couple at the university, and they had a little bit of comedy involved in them. And Soda was obviously the leader, and she was the one planning the concert, the music, so she had a lot on her shoulders. And it was great because when we got to see them, we also got to see Junior and Natty, and all four of them together worked really well. If you watch Luktan, the way she looks at both the guys, and it was very subtle comedy, whereas Soda was just, you know, at that point uninterested in Junior's attempts to flirt with her because she had a job to do. She's very goal orientated. And then we got to see them a bit more. We got to see them in the concert, so that was nice. We got to see that Soda is definitely a fan of two guys together. And not really much to say apart from it was nice to see at least Soda got a happy ending with Junior. That was really nice. Then we're going to go on to Kane. I really wish he had been in a lot more. He was a great representation of an LGBTQ plus adult in this show. You know, he ran the cafe. I know he was struggling with it, and that was nice. We got to see a little bit of the struggle that he faces. So it's not just the main characters, but it shows you that everyone has issues. I really like that he was the character that sat down with Fighter's father and tried to, in a very adult manner, explain to him you have to let your son live his life and that there are hardships for people who aren't straight. I know his father didn't listen, but just that little moment really made me appreciate this character so much because he was more supposed to be the comedic role, as we saw when he stuck up for Tutor against the loan shark type person. And something that I'm not a fan of what they do in BLs is when someone is gay, they like to make them high pitched, very effeminate, but it's at the expense of the character, not to just say there are people like this. I really do wish he had been in it more. When he had that talk with Tutor, you saw someone who'd gone through a lot. So his backstory would have been nice to really pick apart. Even in that episode, if he just spoken about the hardships he goes through himself. Also, it would have just been nice to have the cafe because it felt as if it was a throwaway uh, element of the show, and having him in it more would have highlighted the I guess the duality of Tutor's school life to then his working life to his home life, and also it just meant more K. Next, we're gonna go on to Zen. This is a hard character because it was very obvious from the beginning he had feelings for Son, and he was the quiet one in the group, and he was the one who didn't like to tease Son because he liked him. But they didn't really use him to the best of his ability. he was just a background character. He was a tertiary character, really. Even the secondary characters overplayed and overpowered him. It was good to see the little liking of Natty. Now, they might have built on that a little bit more, but I don't know if COVID wiped that element out or they would never really go in to use anything more than what we saw.
ชนกันแม่โมเมนต์
But we saw that he ends up with Natty, which we knew was happening because they did give you little hints. After Natty kind of was brushed off by Sol, even though he didn't really notice it, we got that little moment where he looked at Zen and he liked him, and then did he kiss Zen on the cheek? I can't remember, but it showed that that was a relationship that Zen was going to like because finally someone was paying him attention, and then they did that, I think, brilliantly crafted scene of when they pretended to be presenters, and it worked really well, both of them together. Even though it was ridiculous, you could tell both of the actors were trying not to laugh at how silly it was, but they worked really well. But that's all we really got from his character, so I can't, unfortunately, speak too much about him. Next, we have Fighter's father. The dad was the typical stereotype in BL as the father. Not proud of his son, maybe liking another man, wants the best for him, but it has to be a woman. We knew he was going to be trouble because they made sure the music was ominous to imply that he was going to be trouble. We got a great argument scene where he slaps Fighter, and that really highlights that he is struggling to understand his son and understand modern times, and he was not willing to listen to Kay, even though it was seemed as if he was trying to just brush it off. He was a frustrating character in that we didn't really get the arc where we could see him finally come to terms. It was just very quickly done. But I do think the actor, as the dad, did a really good job. And it's just strange because he really does look like a member of my family. So when he was on screen, I kept thinking, it can't be you, because you're not in Thailand. I think he was in the show enough. I think they incorporated him, apart from the end, enough in the show. And I felt like he was just someone for the audience to dislike. He was the bad guy in this situation. And he was just, I think, the stereotype of what a conservative father is. Next, I'm going to put 3 of the characters together, and that is Champ, Do, and Blue. I did not like the character of Do because I just don't like bullies, and I just felt it went a bit too far. And maybe just because the actor, maybe he's just naturally heavy-handed or strong, but it almost felt a bit too forceful, the scenes. Also, he was there and then he wasn't, and then he randomly appeared in a scene that didn't make sense because he wasn't there any other times in the episodes. With Blue, we got a little cute character that was invested in Champ, but then he got invested in Do, but we never saw how that came about. All of a sudden they didn't like each other, and then they were hanging out, and then it seems like they slept together, which didn't, I felt, go with the character of Blue. That just felt very strange. Also, it looked like Champ was starting to like Blue because now he couldn't have him, so they could have easily built up a love triangle. I felt as if all 3 of these characters were fodder for the show, and they didn't bring much to the show because we were at first getting a story arc with them, with how aggressive Do was to Blue and Champ defending him, but then that kind of just died down very quickly, and I felt they could have easily used 5-10 minutes of them in scenes to build up their relationship, because they were including Blue in elements like football and stuff like that when he was kicking the ball into the net, but they never really went anywhere with these 3 characters, and it's a shame because I really, as much as I didn't like Do, and I really don't as a character, I would have been more invested if I got to see the 3 of them have more of a story arc and not just be incorporated because they needed a C, D, E, F, G subplot, because they weren't even probably anywhere close to the A, B, C, or D subplots. And I felt it was unfair to the actors. It felt like they were underutilized. Next we have Day. Day was an interesting character. To me, he looks like the actor Sinto. He really looks like him, I feel, in certain angles. He was used more at the beginning. He was used to show that Hua actually had someone who probably would have appreciated her a lot more than Fighter did. And we got a nice little elements where we saw some parts of his friendship with Tutor, but we didn't really get to see enough. We got to see flashbacks from their first year, and then we saw elements at the beginning, and then he got with Hua, which I really appreciate. I'm glad that they showed a heterosexual couple and they kissed. But that was it. He was kind of just not there afterwards. But again, I really do think that had to do with probably COVID, because I felt Hua and Day could have been used a lot more for a friendship group. But he did a good job in what he had, and I felt he drew you in to his attraction to Hua, and I felt really bad for him because she wasn't interested until she realized the one thing she wanted wasn't what she needed. And then we have Soul. I really like the sibling dynamic between Son and Soul. Also, she is technically the reason it all starts, because her story was super popular and then her brother found out and it started to make him dream more about Sci-Fi. He obviously already dreamed about Sci-Fi because we saw that right at the beginning, but she was the means in which the story was progressing. She was the main plot. Her novel was the reason all of this started for Son. And they had the dynamics of them speaking and then her catching Son and Sci-Fi accidentally kissing in the flashback. That helped write her story. Then we got little parts of her where she was speaking to Blue and she wanted to incorporate him in the story, and she was obviously a popular writer at the school. So I'm not sure if she would go into journalism or writing, but I felt like her character when she gets older would be a writer. Maybe even the actual writer of Why Are You? It would have been her story. We got her at the beginning, and then we got the element where she spoke to Son to lie to him and say that the ending of his relationship with Sci-Fi was different to what it was. And then we got to see her cheer her brother on, which was nice. But she faded very quickly in the show. And it felt as if it was because of COVID, because she was in it quite a lot, even in little scenes like Natty was there, and it felt like there was going to be a storyline. Even if she wasn't interested, there was some sort of storyline for her in that. But then it just disappeared. And it's a shame because I think the actress did a really good job. And I truly believed her and Son were siblings. They did a really good job in letting you see that little squabbling side of siblings and also the caring side. I just wish we had seen a lot more, because I think her character was needed. So I'm hoping in maybe the special episodes that they film, they incorporate her a lot more. They add in a little storyline for her. Did she end up with someone? I don't think she did. It would be nice to see her with someone. Then I'm going to now put two people together, and that is who I consider probably my joint favourite couple, is Japan and Tantai. There's something about them. I think it's the actor who plays Japan. And I'm not talking about him outside of the show because I've seen clips. I'm talking about what the actor did for the character Japan. Something about the character I really liked. I liked that he was so shy, he was unassuming. It almost felt as if he didn't think he was good enough to be loved by someone, and then Tantai comes and he's really flirtatious. I mean, he doesn't know about personal space and boundaries. And he knows what he wants. But it also showed little sweet moments when Japan was talking to the cat, and Tentai saw that, and you could see the attraction grow in him. And the little Eskimo or Nugwit's kiss, that they gave, those were really sweet moments. Moments like that I really appreciate because, again, they were innocent. I thought they were a mixture of the hot and heaviness of Tutor and Fighter and the sweet innocent nature of Son and Saifar. They have both of those the the two main couples incorporated into them. They were a mixture of both because Tantai, he was always touching Japan and he was always about this close to his lips. So that was also funny to watch because he was so overtly attracted to Japan, was in his space. And then we did see a really nice moment where Japan was nervous about the football game, and then he was going to offer him something like maybe a kiss and a date if he won. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see that, and that would have been great to see because I really love this couple. I would love to see a little story of them and how their relationship developed from after that moment where he promises him if he wins. Because they just disappeared and they were in it a lot at the beginning, and I felt because they were a mixture of the two main couples, that's why I really liked them. I felt they did such a good job of reeling you in, but also making you laugh because of how uncomfortable Japan got, but also how much Tantai touched him. And watching the behind the scenes is a great thing to watch because you see how annoyed the director got, but also how many takes it took for them to work because sometimes it doesn't work. But Tantai would touch him a lot, and that would add to the comedy element of it because he was so invasive in what he did, but it was never with any malice. It was all to do with he was super attracted to Japan and he just wanted him to know. Then we have Natty and Junior, and the reason I put these two together was because they are a fantastic comedy double act. I can't say anything but praise for the two actors, even though it was over the top in what they did, it was supposed to be over the top. And they knew how to do comedy very well, both of these guys. They obviously know they're very funny people in real life, so it works for the characters, and you saw behind the scenes how many takes they would do stuff and they would get it right. Natty always makes me laugh because he was so camp, the actor, when he did his stuff and so over the top. And do you know the moment when he opens the elevator lifts doors, I should say, and he makes a little heart? That was one of my favourite scenes. I think Natty is one of my favourite characters, and Junior, when they see Son and Saifar playing guitar and it looks like they're going to kiss and their faces are smushed against the mirror outside the glass. That was a great little comedy moment that the show needed, and I felt they were in it a lot. It was only near the end when they had the beach scenes that they weren't really incorporated. So they had a great deal to do there. I think both the guys, the actors, will have a really good career, especially in comedy, because that's their niche, and there's nothing wrong with having a niche as long as they get a main role at some point. I'd love to see them get a main role. And then I'm going to go to Hua or Hua Hua. It was really refreshing to have a female character here that wasn't the bad one, that wasn't trying to cause too many problems. She just wanted to be loved. She just wanted Fighter to care for her. And he just didn't feel that way. And the actress does an amazing job of making your heart feel like it's breaking for her. Yeah, there are some things that she did I didn't like, where she almost tried to blackmail him, but she would have gone through with her little threat. That was just really to try and protect her heart. She wanted Fighter to be happy, and she loves Tutor. He's her best friend. Now, she was in it a great deal, especially at the beginning. I wish she was in it more near the end, because it just felt like her storyline did run its course, and that's why she wasn't needed as much. But she plays the role, which she does in Together With Me as well, really well, of that fake damsel in distress. She's actually quite an independent character, and she's happy, and she wants to be happy. And the scene when she was really frustrated with Tutor and Fighter in the car highlights that she could be serious. She puts on a smile because she doesn't want everyone around her to be sad, even when she is. And she is one of my favorite female characters they've ever incorporated in BL because they gave her layers and they made her likable, and they need to do that more. And also, they let her get with Day, and I appreciate that we got to see a heterosexual couple in this, and it wasn't forced. Now we're gonna go on to Son. Son lives in a fantasy world at the beginning. I mean, literally, the first thing we see is his dream. And he dreams in animation and Technicolor and circus theme songs. But he started off. I didn't really like the character. He was a bit frustrating for me, and it was too much. I want to fight. I want to fight. I want to fight. It's like, okay, calm down, sit down. Also, it felt misplaced, his anger towards Cypher when it wasn't. It actually wasn't, because Cypher did kiss the girl that he thought he was seeing. And then we got to see great home life, but he was and constantly wrapped around the idea of the novel and fantasy bleeding into reality, and it kind of hindered his character at the beginning. Once we got away from that, we got to see that he's just a genuinely sweet guy, and the actor does amazing and kind of giving that innocent look, that half smile, and knowing that there's no malice in what he does. He's just a young guy. He genuinely portrayed a perfect 18, 19 year old. He was perfect, I felt. He once Son let go, we saw a passionate, talented individual and someone who cared for Cypher. And but it he would not let go for so long about the novel aspect and silliness of it. And then when we got them at the beach and we finally got a quite a for them hot and heavy kiss scene, it was interesting that they used tongues. And also, what I really liked that the director did, and I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, they allowed the audience to hear when people's lips smack together, when you can hear kind of the air between kisses and the tongues. And sometimes it sounds like a weird sound when you're kissing someone and people have, out of breath. It felt real, their kiss. And also it felt very awkward, especially when the tongues were incorporated. And it worked for the characters. And Son grew up a lot. He grew up probably the most out of everyone on the show, because once he felt he wasn't in the novel world, he let his guard down, and you could see that he's actually a nice guy who just kind of is living his life. He's young. He doesn't think too much about relationships. He's just living his life. And then we have Cypher. I really like that the actor, when he said Son, has a lisp. I think it really works with the character, especially because he's about 193 meters. I think he's about 6'3", 6'4". So this humongous baby, childlike guy, and then he lisps and he's got that smirk about him, and then you realise he might have liked Son from that first moment they kiss, especially when Son found the book in his room. But he's also a bit mischievous. He liked to tease Son, and he was greatly talented at the guitar and singing. And you could see Sci-Fi is someone that when he cares for you, he truly cares. And he was also innocent because though he had a mischievous smirk, that was not sexual. It was more him just teasing, and it was the representation of his age that worked. And then how they built up the relationship with Son and Cypher. And Cypher was very caring. He wanted to make sure that when he gave you guitar lessons, he was truly training you. And then they had little comedy moments where he was upstairs and he was cold and he had the blanket wrapped around him. And then it ended with him being a bit possessive. He made sure that Son knew he was spending the night with him, and he was quite horny, actually. And now that I think back, because he would constantly say that he wanted to sleep with Son, and he meant it in a sex way. So was he a virgin, and he just really wanted to have sex with Son? Not sure, but yeah, he was a horny little devil. And then And then we have Tutor and Fighter. Both of these have the same elements. They have a very hard outer shell. They do not like people to get too close to them. Now the difference is Tutor is actually sweet to everyone else around him. He almost feels very weak in nature because he's accommodating and he smiles and he doesn't have that hard shell, but when it comes to his relationship with Fighter, he built up a shell very quickly. And I think it was in part that he was afraid to be hurt because his family owed so much money and his life had been turned upside down and they were all around the world at this point. So he didn't have a home life, and also because of his attraction to Fighter and he felt that Fighter didn't like him, he had to create that. It feels as if Tutor's the type of person, he gives what you give him. So if you're nice towards him, he's nice towards you. If you're not nice towards him, then he's not nice towards you. And he was looking for someone to break that outer shell and see who he really was. And that was Fighter. And Fighter's the same. Fighter is very tough exterior. He has a demanding father, so his home life wasn't the best. Yes, he came from money, but I'm guessing his mother either left or died. And he only had his father, who honestly looked like he was more business focused. So his son was almost abandoned. So he had no home life. And he built up that shell because it felt almost as if, because of how people spoke about Fighter, that they felt he was so tough, when in fact he's quite soft and quite romantic. He's actually very romantic with Tutor. And watching a breakdown for both of them, like when they spoke about the cactus, they are like the cactus. They're prickly on the outside, but they are soft on the inside and full of water, full of care. And seeing them break each other down, but in a way that meant they can open their hearts and know that they can be loved, because Fighter really gave everything to Tutor. And when Tutor really was trying to be respectful to his father and break up with Fighter, and they cried, it was interesting to see the different layers of crime, but I think that had to do with the actor's experience and what they've gone through. Fighter is one of those that all he needs, like Tutor, is a bit of love. And seeing that be broken down piece by piece shows that sometimes we judge people on how they are, and you should never judge a book by its cover. I know sometimes the content might not be great, but in this case, for these two it was. And their relationship worked, but it was very heavy. I mean, it was so sexual, the tension was so heightened, and I think it's because they are so similar that when they're together, it just explodes the passion. So that was my view on the characters. And then I thought now I would go into, because we're around 40 minutes, so it's not that long, it could be longer. We're going to go into questions. I'm going to start with Patreon. And so I'm going to use this person's questions for also together. So this is from Mini Cuckoo. And their first question is, what do you think could be improved from the series? And maybe this will be put into the special episodes, so then my opinion will completely change. What could have been improved is taking out some characters, because there was too many. I think what you could have done to improve it was also, if you were going to incorporate the novel element, to incorporate much more than you did. Also, I don't think they should have resolved the issue with Fighter's father so easily. And given some of the side characters a bit more character development. I think that could have improved the series. I felt if we had got to know a bit more of the other couples, you could have enjoyed it even more. And also, I do think toning down a bit of the make out and love kissing scenes, some of them could have been tempered down a bit more. Then the next question is, which couple do you think has the best chemistry and why? Oh. Now, I have to think about this because I want to say Son and Saifa because of how much I like the characters, but I think it's a tie between Son and Sci-Fi and Tutor and Fighter. I think the chemistry and how they incorporated, how different they were, was beautiful. It was just so different and it worked. I felt you couldn't pair them with anyone else. I feel like you can't even pair now the actors with anyone else because of how well they did this. And the chemistry between them was amazing. It worked because for Tutor and Fighter, it was hot and heavy, it was steamy, it was passionate, it was aggressive. Son and Sci-Fi, it was more teasing, and it worked because it's their ages; they're quite young. I think I have to say they're the two best. I think in terms of chemistry. Then the next question is, which of the kisses was your favorite? I'm not going to lie, because I've been doing these episodes once a week. I do tend to forget the episodes as they go along because there are so many of them. My favorite kiss. Do you know, I think, and it's not to do with lip. No, I think my favorite kiss actually is after the concert in episode 8 when Sci-Fi is trying to calm Son down and he's nervous, and after they've done everything, and I think the way he kisses him really just showed how much both the characters had grown in attraction and just development. That kiss I felt was so beautifully done. I think the actors did such a good job. The way Sci-Fi comforted Son, really, yeah, that was beautiful. And then my next question is from Mark, and this is just a synopsis of what he put. So, do you notice the profound danger of the secondary couple or couples when they exist, overshadowing the primary couples, and to wonder if that is a problem with writing, the acting, or the directing, or merely an inevitable happenstance of a particular audience member's bias towards physical types of the actors or storylines? Now, this is a great question to pick apart because there is always that danger that people will prefer the secondary couple. I think it happens to do with people get very frustrated if the main couple just argue a lot and there's friction. We also love the side couples because they tend to be less heavy based on dramatics. But the danger then comes that we start to love the secondary characters so much that the primary characters are thrown to the side, and it can hinder an actor's acting career. It could also hinder the show because then people get frustrated and they don't want to watch it. I've noticed a lot of people used to complain about Dark Blue Kiss and about Cal and Pete, whereas must have been the minority because I loved the dynamics of them. In this case, it didn't work in that the primary couples were so infused in the show that they weren't overshadowed. The only couple that could have overshadowed them, and they didn't, was Japan and Tantai, because they weren't incorporated enough. But I do think I don't think it's the acting that is the reason. I think it's more to do with the profound danger comes from the writing. And people get frustrated when it's the same story arc. And whereas the side couple, because they're in it so much less, you want more. And that's the problem. When you want more and you get that, you become bored. And that's when the danger comes into it. Because once you have what you want and you're sated, you don't want any more. And that's why sometimes it's good to have breaks in these shows. So if they were to do a Why Are You 2, it would be good to have a break for a year or so and let them do other things and then see how their relationship builds. Because I would love to see a relationship build from this. And yes, there is always a bias, I feel, from these shows, from audience. I feel you have to be good looking to even for the audience. It feels very vain and vapid, and it's a big problem I have in the BLs shows is it feels if you're just normal looking, you're not even worth anyone's time, and that you're just going to be thrown on the scrap heap of life. And if you're not, and you have to be good looking, and you have to be very fit, and you have to have your shirt off. And so for an audience, they become very biased. If they're attracted to you, they want to know your story. They want to know what you do. They're going to follow you on your social medias. It's just something that I wish people wouldn't be so vain and vapid about, because there's so many talented actors, but because they don't live up to your idea of good looks, you're just then thrown to the side, and it just makes me sad. And again, the bias, it just happens. That's just kind of what it does. If you are attracted to the side couple more, you are also going to be more interested in their story, especially because BL takes you away. People want to be taken away from reality most of the time when it comes to BL, because they used to always have a sad ending, and people were getting frustrated because we know not everything ends happy, but to see a couple actually get a happy ending when so many don't in life is just a fresh of it is a fresh of a breath of fresh air to see that. And we want to see that in couples. I know I went on a tangent outside of the question, but it is just, it's always going to be a danger. Just remember that. But also enjoy the main couple, because there was a reason you liked them if they were a side couple and then they become a main. It was because they had something you wanted to see. And then the next one is from Leo G from Patreon. His first question is, how much did the problems with them not being able to complete filming of the show due to COVID-19 affect your enjoyment of the show? Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't show an honesty to what I'm saying. It did affect my enjoyment of the show to a degree. It didn't affect it for most of the episodes, but when it got to the beach ones, it just felt very inundated and loaded with unnecessary scenes to extend the episode. And I do think it affected my enjoyment because I knew why. Because of COVID, and it's unfortunate this happened because it's a struggle, but a lot of the characters felt just very thrown to the side and not needed anymore. So as the show went on, and they did get better the episodes, but I saw the problems. And so when you know that there is no other actors and things aren't being resolved and we're not seeing couples relationships grow, you do kind of go, okay, it's tempered my enjoyment because I know the reasons why it's being affected. It didn't affect it too much, but yes, there were elements that COVID-19 really did disrupt filming, and it didn't fully get back to its pacing like it should have, but it's very hard. It felt very rushed in elements because they needed to get something out. Second question is, as someone who has worked in the industry, and that's me, how surprised were you that they still had a lot of scenes not filmed so close to the air date? Do you think they should have put the show on hiatus until later in the year when they could have completed filming and aired the storyline as originally intended? This is a great question. Now, in the UK, we tend to film months in advance. That's why we don't have too many problems when it comes to filming. It's just how shows go. They tend to be filmed before they're released. Whereas in America, if you are on a TV show, that's not how it works. You usually have about maybe 6 episodes filmed by the time they start airing on TV, and then they have their breaks, usually, the Christmas break. I do think, and I bet it feels like in Thailand that they do this as well, that maybe they film more in the American style of way, so they have a few episodes filmed and then as the show's progressing they're filming. But I do think it causes a lot of problem for editing. The editors then have to scramble how to get things together, and which means they don't have much sleep. So I hope people appreciate what goes on behind the scenes in post-production. Now, they should really have had most of this film. That's my opinion, because it really disrupted. If they had gone on hiatus, people would have been frustrated, but they would have had all of their original material filmed. and I think that would have made the show even better. It's frustrating that they didn't have so many scenes filmed, but then we did not know COVID-19 was going to happen. So they had no idea. So they probably had maybe episode 6 and 7 filmed by the time COVID happened, maybe even 8 and 9. So they had most of it filmed. But putting it on hiatus, I think because of it already being filmed, if maybe they'd actually pushed the whole show later in the year, that would have been different. Because I think in Thailand they can film again now. But I think if they had stopped when COVID happened and then resumed filming, it's not going to work. Also, the actors are contracted, and who's to say that they would have been available later in the year, which would have meant you couldn't have completed filming and all of that money would have gone to waste. You have to also remember actors have a schedule, and these actors, once they become popular, are very inundated with a hectic filming schedule. So unfortunately, I don't think it would have worked because of all of that, and the crew as well. Who's to say they would have been available? It's just a very unfortunate series of events. And question 3 was, would you have liked to see more cameos of previous BL couples, and if so, who would you have liked to have seen? Do you know what? I know you can't because they're GMMTV, but I think Kongpop and Artie would have been a great little moment. I think Kai and Third from Theory of Love would have been a great little element to see. I feel like they would have worked really well in Son's dreamlike nature. Do you know what? I'm going to open it up to all of you. Who do you think from previous BL couples would have been a great cameo to appear on the show? There's so many of them, but they're the two that come to mind. But the problem is, obviously, companies. When you're in a different company, it just doesn't work like that. But those are the two that I would have really liked to have seen. Maybe Pete and Cal, actually, but I don't know how they would have worked. I felt like they would have just argued the whole time. And now I'm going to go on to the YouTube comments, or questions, I should say. So, from Andy Dufresne, riddle me, or puzzle me this, were they in Soul's fiction or not? Keep in mind that we saw Tharn and Type, and then they said, and the other BL couple, which is T and Fuse. This is something that's always going to play with me, and I know some people got frustrated and a bit annoyed, it seemed, that I couldn't let go of the novel aspect, but it was something that was thrown in our face from the beginning, quite heavily. So it's always something that played on my mind, that is this really reality? Are they just in Soul's fiction? And part of me is saying yes, but a bigger part says no, and it's because of how much they wanted to show you that they were away from it by the way they filmed. The animation disappeared. When Son had his dreams, the lighting wasn't like that. But it's hard to say what is real and what's not because of that beginning. If they had incorporated maybe more, or even not at all, it would have worked. I would say, why not be in her novel? And maybe they created their story around that. Why can't it be both? That was a really weak way to answer that. But it's part of me says yes, part of me says no, and that's the honest answer. I prefer to think they're not in the fiction, because then it just felt that if they were just in the fiction, it would have felt that then they're not real and this whole series was not needed. Now, Alex Ortez has 2 lots of questions. So, what do you think of the couple's dynamic chemistry development? I think I spoke about this. I think I'm just going to quickly answer this. They did a really good job. They picked the right actors for this. They gave you enough development to really believe in their relationships. Now, the next question is, Alex also asked, what do you think of the music original soundtrack? I really liked that the music and the lyrics fit very nicely with the tone of the scenes. Now, what I found really interesting about the opening theme song was that it changed. I think a few times, they had it very sad and somber, then they had it very light-hearted, and then it was then a cappella. It was interesting. It went with how the episode was going to go, so they relied on the tone of the episode. I haven't actually watched the original soundtrack or watched the videos, so I can't talk too much. But I think the music went very well because it was based on the concert really as well. The music behind it. So, and because these guys are in a band and they can sing, that works really well. I just really liked how they changed up the opening theme song. In the pace of it, the tone, the beat of it, that was interesting. Now, Kuya Ruddick, please tell me how to say your name. I do apologize for saying it wrong, I imagine. If you could erase one or more character from the show, who would you pick? Probably a few characters. I would have got rid of Sen, Champ, Do, and Blue. Tem, still don't know who that is. I think they're the ones I would have got rid of. And the reason I would have got rid of them is I felt they didn't really add anything to the story. I think the show had too many characters and they didn't know where to go with them. If they cut down all of them, it would have worked more because we would have had what they gave us, really. These characters weren't incorporated enough to really get a sense of them, whereas I think the other characters would have worked better, and also having less characters means more airtime for the other characters. So that's the question and answers, and that's the end of this. Up next, after this, will be My Engineer. I have filmed up to episode 3 at this point. They are all on Patreon. I'm editing episode 2 after this, so that will be ready on YouTube to go. I'm also doing all of Theory of Love. Now that is already on Patreon, and that was on there from January, February. Now I am going to give a warning about Theory of Love. I had major issues when it came to filming that for the subtitles and stuff like that, so you are going to find a few of them without subtitles, but you've seen the show. But I'm still going to put them on YouTube. GMMTV have been very gracious that if you send an email, they will allow it to become public. It's still copyright, so all ad revenue goes towards them. I'm also going to look at, I think it's Game Boys, because that seems very interesting, and I've not watched a Pinoy BL before. So those are what are coming up next. So you have My Engineer to look forward to, you have Theory of Love, even if the editing is going to be terrible, and then Game Boys. So I hope you stay watching the channel. I hope you enjoyed this review. Thank you for watching.